again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Experience Maker Live. We are coming up on our 100th episode. I cannot believe it. It is amazing. I started this pre-pandemic. I think it was February of 2020. I'm like, hey, this is a great idea. Let's start a virtual series. And little did I know that we'd still be going at it. I want to remind people that I have a brand new book out. Let me show it to you. It's called The Experience Maker, How to Create Remarkable Experiences That Your Customers Can't Wait to Share. I'm getting such great feedback on it, which I so appreciate. You know, one of the things that people say that I really appreciate as one of the best compliments is they say that it's an easy read. And that's actually very intentional. You see, I was never really good at the SAT where you had to know all these really fancy words and you had to do all that stuff. I never have a thesaurus next to me when I'm writing or speaking. I just write how I speak. And so when somebody says it's easy to read, I actually think of that as a terrific compliment. And so I definitely appreciate it. I also wanted to remind people that my podcast, Experience This, the podcast that I do with Joey Coleman, is back next week, next Tuesday, the 8th. We are so excited to launch season 9 of Experience This. We've been doing it for 9 seasons, 150 plus episodes. Now, it's a totally different format than this show. Each episode, we have 3 segments that are approximately 10 minutes each, and we tell a different customer experience story. And kind of like The Price is Right, that has a bunch of different games, but every episode you only get a handful of games. That's what we do too. We have about 12 different segments that we choose from, and each episode we have 3 different segments. So you never know what you're going to get. It's always interesting. It's always a surprise. And we really try to make it a listening experience. We figure if we're customer experience people, we got to make sure that it's a great experience to listen to the show. Now, some of you may know that I just came from another live show, and I'm actually waiting for that host to join us here. I was on the Jack Rants live show hosted by Jack Hubbard, and Jack is going to be the guest today on my show. So we've got sort of a double header here, or a crossover episode, if you will. So while we're waiting for Jack, let me tell you a little bit about him. He is the Chief Experience Officer of St. Meyer and Hubbard, and they are an organization that helps banks with sales training, customer experience, all that sort of thing. And it's very focused on banks and credit unions, particularly local banks. And I think he's such an interesting guy because, as you know, I really like to highlight a different industry every week here because we can all learn from different industries. And I've often said, you know, if you are a bank, the last place you should look to for inspiration is another bank. Right? That's not where you're going to find a whole lot of inspiration because most banks look the same and the experience is the same. What you got to be doing is looking at other industries that have nothing to do with yours. So the story that I heard recently about people standing in line at the Harry Potter world in Universal Studios, and they stand in line on purpose. They actually don't want to go on the ride. They want to just experience the standing in line, where they walk through Hogwarts Castle and they get to see all the characters in action and they see the picture frames on the wall that are animated like in the movie. And the whole walking in line, waiting in line thing becomes the experience. They get to the front of the line and they pass on going on the ride. And so I ask, where do you make your customers wait? And can you make that really interesting? I think you can. I think it's a great opportunity because in almost every business, we are making our customers wait. All right, let's hang on for 1 second. I am hoping that we are going to get Jack here in a jiffy. Otherwise, you're going to have to talk to me for half an hour, and I can do it, but we'll see here. So Jack is says that he is coming, and oh, there he is. There he is, the man, the legend. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hi, Dan. Good to see you. Glad to be here. I hit the wrong button.
No worries, no worries. We're happy that you're here. You missed your introduction, but trust me, I said nice things about you, so don't worry about that. But why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and also about St. Meyer and Hubbard?
Sure. Thank you, Dan. Well, it's great to have you on great to be on your show. And it was so awesome to have you on mine just a couple of minutes before this. And your book is absolutely tremendous. And I actually did hear, because I was on the LinkedIn Live show, but didn't get on the StreamYard. I did hear you talking about an easy read, and everybody out there needs to buy your book. It's just a fabulous book. My career is kind of interesting. I think I think life is so serendipitous. You just don't know what's going to happen. Ever since I was 6, I wanted to be the play-by-play voice of the Chicago Cubs. I would
Yes.
I would turn the sound down and hit the tape recorder and listen back to it. In high school, I did St. Edward High School games here on the local radio station in Elgin, Illinois, and went to college at Northern Illinois and did the Northern Illinois Husky games. And so that was always my thought process. I got married in 1972. As it happens, I saw a little ad because I needed a job for a bank collector. And that was at Union National Bank in Elgin. Started there, worked in banking for 13 years at a couple of banks, and then went into sales training. And I've had such a fortunate career. I've traveled to 49 states, trained about 75,000 bankers in sales. And, we started our little company. I call it our little science project 23 years ago. And we focus on community banks, large banks, credit unions, teaching people how to have better sales conversations and sales management conversations.
Well, I have to ask, what's the 50th state?
That's a great question. And when I was actually teaching live, which I think was about 2 years ago, I would always say I've taught at 49 states, and then I hit 1001, 1002, and then I say Alaska, because everybody always wants to know. But I'll get there, Dan.
Gotcha. I have been there, actually. I've only been to maybe 35, 36 states, but I have been to Alaska. Your story that you were telling me reminded me of this guy, Jeremiah Paprocki, who kind of had the same dream that you did, and then all of a sudden is now the Chicago Cubs public address announcer. Not quite the play-by-play, but also what a really, really cool job. And so good for him. He's the first African American to hold that job. I think he's the youngest to hold that job because he's only in his 20s, I believe. But really inspirational story that, hey, anything is possible. So I had a similar dream or hope for my career, having something to do with the Cubs. And actually, quick story, I actually got to interview with the Cubs when I got out of business school. I got the opportunity to go interview there because the head of marketing at the time was I believe a roommate of one of the deans at Kellogg. And so I got that, I know somebody who knows somebody, and I got in for the interview. And this was John McDonough, who then went on to the Blackhawks. And I went and did the interview at Wrigley Field, and John and I hit it off immediately. And it turns out that back then, because this was the pre-Theo Epstein era, baseball teams didn't know what to do with MBAs. He's like, you're really impressive, but I don't know where to put you. I don't have a job for you. And so it was a little bit of a disappointment because there wasn't anything there. But while I was there, I decided to, take a little bit of a risk, because my dad likes to say, you don't get what you don't ask for. And while I was at Kellogg, I happened to be in a men's a cappella group, something I had never done before. I kind of tried out on a dare, and I made the team, so to speak. And so I said to John while I was in his office, any chance that we could sing the national anthem at Wrigley Field? He said, that I can do. And so later that season, my a cappella group got to go sing the national anthem at Wrigley Field, and that was an incredible experience, and just one that I will absolutely never forget. So something came of it.
Well, that's great. In Chicago, those of us in the Chicago area know Phil Ponce and the Ponce brothers, who are all broadcasters, one on WGN, one on PBS. And they had or may still have an a cappella group. And I think a couple of them went to Northwestern, Dan.
Yeah, interesting. Well, like I said, I never thought going to business school would get me into an a cappella group, but it was a lot of fun, and it was a great extracurricular, if you will, while I was getting the MBA.
Life is serendipitous, isn't it? It's just so interesting what happens every day. I think your dad's right. I think you don't want to ever close things off to opportunities.
Yeah, and I'm a believer of that too. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm a very spiritual person, but I do sort of believe that the universe just works in strange ways sometimes, and things happen for a reason. The reason I went off on my own and started my own company was really because not only was I at a company that I was not particularly enjoying, I think it was kind of a bad situation, but I just happened to figure out that they were laying some people off and that they were giving them really nice packages. And so I raised my hand and I said, how about me? And as it turned out, I got a 4-month severance package. And if I didn't have that, I probably wouldn't have started my own company because I would have been too scared to go without a paycheck. And so I got the 4 months and I said, all right, you got 4 months to go launch this company. And that's what I did. And so I look back at that as, well, it wasn't a great experience working there, but I had to have that experience in order to get to the point where I could ask to be let go and get that package and start my own company. So I do think the universe just sometimes presents us opportunities and we just have to be able to take them when they arise.
I think you're right, Dan. And it's interesting. Life is so serendipitous and the world is so small. So here's how small the world is. John McDonough's daughter is a phenomenal banker in Chicago. I've had the privilege of having her in my sales training class. And Joey Coleman is going to be on our show in the fall, your partner that does your podcast. So yep. It's a pretty small world. And I think social media has helped in a lot of ways, has hurt in a lot of ways. But your book talks about relationships. I mean, you don't specifically say it that way, but that's really what banking is all about still, is this whole idea of putting buyers and sellers together in a relationship value-based kind of way.
Well, it's interesting you say that, Jack, because we touched on this a little bit on your show. I think that's what banking started off as. And I think that's what the early banking system was about before you got all these mega banks that are on every single corner that have sort of, in some ways, destroyed that. But I love that you work with community banks, credit unions, smaller organizations that still hang on to that. And to me, that is the competitive advantage that they have.
Oh, there's no doubt. It's still a people business. I think the pandemic has heightened the need for customers to have a good relationship with their banker. And it is indeed a people business, despite the fact that we're doing much more digitally. We're doing much more with technology. I mean, look where we are here, Dan. Who would have imagined even 5 years ago that you could be in your home, I could be in my home, we could be having lighting that looks studio quality and be able to talk to each other via this technology. But despite all of that, and I'm very pleased. I'm on the board of directors of one of the Wintrust banks, and we're still involved with people. It's all about people. Technology is important, but if you don't have good relationships with your banker when you need them most, when this pandemic hit, you've got a problem. And I think that's come through in spades during this pandemic.
For sure. And I'd say the other part of that is we talked on your show about how I look at myself as a storyteller. And I think what's so fascinating is everybody's got a story. It's just a question of how do we get it out of them. And what I love about your local bank is that they're helping people. They're giving them loans. They're giving them access to credit. They're helping them start businesses. And all of those people and all of those businesses have stories. And I think the more that local banks can talk about those stories and highlight those stories, the more appealing they're going to be to other people in their community, because that's when somebody says, well, why not me? Why couldn't I do something like this? It's kind of like when I watch Shark Tank with the kids, right? And there's inevitably that 14-year-old that's got $1 million business. And I turn to my teenagers and I'm like, come on, guys, you're behind the 8 ball. Let's go. But I love I think there's such a great opportunity for that community bank, for that credit union who really does know their customers, to start telling some of those stories. I think it can be very, it's not only really credible because it's real and it's human, but I think it's very attractive, especially to younger consumers who are looking for banking relationships. They want to go to a place where they're going to be treated like a human, not an account number.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think there's two sides to the story, and there's something in the middle. One of the stories is when a banker uses LinkedIn, and they aren't using it as well as they could, but when they use LinkedIn, instead of writing your about section as your resume, you need to write it as a resource and tell your story. How have you helped people? What do you do on a daily basis to make sure that businesses that you work with continue to grow? When you tell that story at 3:17 in the morning, when I wake up every day as a business owner and I worry
Please
about
don't call me. Please don't call me at 3:17.
I worry about my people. I worry about my clients. I worry and worry and worry. And if I need a new bank and I go to 3:17 in the morning to LinkedIn and I say, who's a banker in my town that can help me? If I don't relate to that story, I'm going to move on to the next banker. The other side of the story is when I help a business with a loan, let's say, how do I track how I help that business? In other words, what is their story? Why are they getting this money and what are they doing with it? And so we need to capture that side, because when I do sales training, one of the things I teach is how to tell your story to a prospect based on what you've done with clients. But the linchpin for that, Dan, is something that you grew up with, and that's marketing. We need to have marketing as a partner. So, and I always say, why don't we just have marketing go out to maybe 5 really good clients and ask them a couple of questions? Why did you decide to bank with us? What have we done with you as a result of banking with us? And what would you tell someone who called about us as a reference? Put those things together in a story format, and now you can help your bankers tell your story in a concise way that's going to relate to those businesses that you're trying to sell to.
Yeah, and if I could even take it a step further, Jack, I would ask the questions all about the company, not the bank, right? So I want to learn everything about your company. What is it that you sell? Where do you source your products? Who are your customers? And tell their story, but through the eyes of the bank, right? Because I think people can make the connection that the bank is helping this company do their thing, right? Let me give you an example that I actually comes from business school. It came from a Harvard business case that I always remember. I've been out of business school, sadly, a long time. But there was a micro lender, and basically this company was set up to provide micro loans to women in the poorest parts of Africa. And the idea was to help them start their own business, mostly craft related. You know, they weave, or they're making clothing or baskets or something, and then they want to sell them. And so this organization is a nonprofit, provided these microloans. Well, they get the microloans from folks like you and me here in the United States. And what they found when they did a journey map was that their typical donor would provide one loan. And let's say it's a $500 loan. And then a year passes and the loan gets repaid with a little bit of interest. And then that's the end of the story. And what they were finding was that the people that were making the loans, they couldn't figure out, well, why don't they reinvest their money when they get it back and do another loan? Or why don't they do 3 or 4 loans? And the reason was because this microlender wasn't telling them any stories. So this woman in Africa who I'm helping with my loan, I don't even know who this is. It's just a mirage. So they ended up sending cameras to the women in Africa, and they created these basically weekly, we used to call them vlogs, video blog, right? Where they would just shoot a few seconds of video saying like, hi, I'm so-and-so, and here's my business, and here's what I've been doing, and this is how my business grew in the last month, and what have you. And they'd send it to the donor. And now all of a sudden the donor is engaged and is involved and is part of the story and feels great about their donation or their investment. And so what they found almost immediately was they had about a 95% retention rate. So I get my loan back and I immediately do another one. And they found that people started making more and more of these microloans because they thought they could see the impact they were making. And all that really is storytelling. That's really all that was missing. And they figured it out in the customer journey because they asked people, essentially, what were they thinking during that year which was almost complete silence. And the answer was they weren't thinking anything. It was that they were completely uninvolved. So I tell that story because, again, I think what's so interesting about especially your community bank is there's stories like that all over the place of companies that you're helping because you provided a loan or because you provided a bank account or maybe even you sponsored something. And those are the stories that we want to tell. If your bank sponsors your local Little League team, tell that story. Tell the story of the Little League team, because who doesn't like a Little League team? And so I think it's a lot of today, it's just about finding the right kinds of stories to tell.
Well, last year, over 1 million books were written, over 1 million. Why would I pick your book? I'll tell you why. Because of the level of engagement you had with me, because of the marketing that was done. There's a lot of reasons. My point is that there are still about 5,000 banks in America, about 5,000 credit unions. In most communities, there are several. Why would I pick one over another? And it goes to your point about engagement. The problem many times is that we don't teach enough specificity around what engagement really means. To me, engagement means helping by sending something of value on a very regular basis, using tools that bankers have. We know of a great company called Vertical IQ that it's a business intelligence tool, and they provide a lot of value to banks who subscribe to Vertical IQ, and then the banker can send on value to the client. So it's all about knowing what the value is. It's all about executing the value and therefore creating a level of engagement. But the third thing, and one of the things I really liked about your book, was that you kind of wrap things up with leadership, because nothing happens in a culture unless a leader says it's going to happen. If you've got a disengaged bank president or a credit union president, and all they really care about is operations and IT and compliance and risk, all of which are important, but they don't care about the customer, that's going to filter down all the way to the bankers, and that's how the banker will treat the customer.
Yeah, it's like I'm thinking, when I drive by the banks in my area, and there's always that local bank that's got the sign out front with the letters that you put up on the board, and invariably they're advertising their interest rate. You think that's going to get me to stop and pull over and come into your bank? Like, that isn't it. Even if it is, a quarter of a percentage lower than somebody else, that is a very transactional piece. Whereas, I'd prefer a sign that tells me that I'm welcome there, or that shows me the kind of experience that I'm going to have there. One of the stories I told in the book, early on in the pandemic, we all got emails from every company that ever had our email address. And it's like they all copied and pasted the same email. It was all about how we were enhancing our cleaning procedures. It was always enhanced. It wasn't, I don't know why they all use the same word, that we have enhanced cleaning procedures. And we'd like to point you to the CDC website if you'd like to learn anything else about COVID. And it's like, thanks. That's the 40th email I've gotten this week that said exactly the same thing. Then Charles Schwab sent me an email, and they said, we know that you must be really worried about a volatile stock market. So we have all of these tools and features that will help you through this tumultuous time. And if you need to talk to somebody, we're here for you. Wow, that's a completely different email than our cleaning procedures. By the way, that Charles Schwab never told me about their cleaning procedures, which was good because I didn't care. But they did make me feel like they knew me, because they understood that, yeah, you're right, I was worried about a volatile stock market. They had value to give me in the form of their tools, and they let me know that they were there for me and that I could speak to a human if I needed to. And I think that is so powerful and makes me even more loyal to them than I was when it started. We're running up on time, but anything come to mind for you in terms of an example of something that a bank is doing that stands out to you as being remarkable, or that might fit within the Wiser framework as just being different and standing out from the competition?
Yeah, we've got a bank out on the East Coast that does something called 3 before 8. It's fascinating. So they've got 20 bankers. Every morning, they find 3 things that they could send to 3 clients, prospects, or centers of influence. Something of value, an article, a white paper, maybe a lead, and it lands in the email box of that potential buyer, that client, prospect, center of influence before 8 a.m., 3 before 8. And if you really do the math, it's 3 a day times 20 bankers times 4 weeks times 52 weeks. If you do something like that, and the really neat thing about it, what we taught them was, don't follow up. Don't say, do you like me now? Would you like to buy something? Just leave it lay. Their pipeline referrals have gone significantly up just by that little thing that they do.
That's great. I love that. And you're right. You add it all up, and that is a ton of value that you've provided for a ton of clients. And I love the fact that it's also selfless. You know, it's just, we're just going to send you value. We can try to sell you some other time, but not this time. Right now, we're just going to give you value. And man, that does come off as a lot more authentic. So awesome example. Jack, how can people get a hold of you? And I didn't have a prepared line like you did, but as soon as you say it, I'm going to put it up on the screen.
Hubbard at smandh.com is my email. But the best way to do it, message me on LinkedIn, Dan. I'm on LinkedIn an awful lot, and I will respond. And I'm so grateful and honored that you would have me on your show. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Jack. It's been a fun hour. It's been a really fun crossover. I've enjoyed talking to you both on the Jack Rants live show and on Experience Maker live show. So keep in touch and keep sharing those great experiences, because as I said on the onset of your show, if you're looking for inspiration in the banking world, chances are you're going to have to find it outside the banking world. But I love it when you find it inside. And that means that there's companies that are really doing stuff to stand out. So congrats on your success in getting companies to do that.
Thank you, Dan. All the best, and all the best to your new book.
Thank you very much. And thank you for being here every week, normally at noon Eastern. Today we were a half an hour late, but next week we will be back at our normal time. And in just a second, I'm going to show you who we've got on. We have got Lamont Gwynn coming on. I met Lamont. He is so cool. He is a virtual experience producer. He does photography. He does video, live events, all sorts of stuff. We're going to talk about the virtual experience next week with Lamont. I think you will really, really enjoy it. He's such a cool guy. And again, as I always say, I like to try to cover different industries, different people from different places on this show, because you can always take a nugget and apply it to our business. So hopefully you got some ideas from the banking world today. I certainly have one, which is find opportunities to provide value from people and don't ask for anything in return. Just be that person that provides value. Thanks so much for being here. I'm Dan Gingiss, the Experience Maker. We'll see you next week on the Experience Maker Live Show.